Hey potters, in this video you're going to learn some different techniques for using underglaze. All right, for the masking tape technique, you're going to use any type of masking tape. If you are going out to buy masking tape, I really like the blue painter's masking tape that is made for sharp lines. But if you don't have that, any masking tape will do. Now, the nice thing about using masking tape is you can cut whatever design you want out of the masking tape. So I'm going to cut some stripes. You want to make sure it's really pressed down good, so hopefully underglaze doesn't slip underneath it. Now, let's talk about when we are using underglaze. I'm going to pause here for a second and switch modes. When you're using underglaze, if you only put one coat of underglaze on, it's going to get this kind of streaky finish, okay? If you put 2 coats on, it gets a little bit more opaque. 3 to 4 coats is what we want if you want a nice opaque surface. I'm going to go ahead and juice up my brush. I like to put quite a bit of underglaze on my brush, and then I'm kind of just laying this on. I'm not brushing in one area a lot. I want to lay it on thick. So thick and as even as you can. And then I'm going to set this aside so that it can dry, and then I'm going to put another coat on going the opposite direction. I will do that 3 times until I have 3 coats of underglaze on it, and then I'll reveal what it looks like. All right, this is the masking tape one. Again, I've put 3 more coats of underglaze on it. It's almost dry. So I'm going to take off the masking tape. So as you've been learning, the dryness or wetness of the clay is really important. And for most of these techniques, you want your clay to be like at the end of the leather hard state. So you can't bend it anymore. Some of it even might appear to be lighter. So not totally dry, but pretty close to it. All right, the next one I'm going to show you is a paper stencil. And you can take any type of paper you have laying around and cut any shape out that you would like. I've already cut a shape out here. So I'm going to use this little spray bottle. I'm going to spray the stencil and maybe the slab a smidge. That's going to help it stick. Then I'm going to press that down really well. Again, you're just trying to make a good seam here so that hopefully the underglaze does not slip underneath. And again, I'm going to put on a heavy, even coat of underglaze and then set it aside and let that dry. I have off camera put 3 more coats of underglaze on this, and then you just peel away the paper and you have your design there. This next one is Sgraffito. So I have already taken my very leather hard piece of clay, or in your situation it would be your project you're working on, and I've applied 3 coats of underglaze. And I'm going to take my wooden skewer. I am playing around with these little dinosaurs. So you could draw anything you wanted. You could draw it in pencil and then go over it with Sgraffito. But for this example, I'm just going to use what I already have. And what you're doing is you are just cutting through or kind of scratching off that top layer of underglaze to reveal the color of the clay. And then you're gonna have these little crusties. If you have a brush, or you can kind of tap them off to get rid of those little crusties. And that would be like very, very basic Sgraffito. But you can go in, and if you've ever taken another art class and learned how to do hatching and cross hatching, those are all techniques that you can do with Sgraffito. With practice and learning more about hatching and cross hatching, I mean, you could do a portrait of your grandmother if you wanted. So this is Sgraffito. All right, next up is Inlay, and I have already kind of traced my little guy here. Again, you could do any design that you wanted. You could do lettering, just a pattern, it's up to you. I have traced him quite deep, okay? Not going all the way through, but pretty deep. And then I put this in front of the fan and let it dry a little bit so that I could just knock off those crusties. If you try to get rid of those crusty pieces of clay right when you do it, it's gonna push it back down or back into the clay, and you wanna avoid that. So I like to do it and then put it in front of the fan, let it dry, and then break those little pieces off. And then I'm gonna fill that in with underglaze. I really wanna fill in that line work with the underglaze. And then I'm gonna set this aside to dry. I added some little spots on this guy. I will say that I went back in and added a few more coats of underglaze, but for the most part, it's dry. So you wanna wait till it's dry. Again, you're gonna get your sponge. You don't want it really wet. And you are going to start rubbing away. And what happens is the underglaze on the top surface rubs away while the underglaze in your design remains. I'm going to show you how to do a transfer. Now again, you can do a lot of things with this technique. I have many more videos on how to do Xerox transfers and transfers on my YouTube channel. But again, I'm showing you the very basic. I'm gonna make those spots again. And I'm loading up my brush every single time because I want these spots of underglaze to be pretty thick. You could draw any shape, any design that you want. Then I'm going to set this aside and let this dry. You are going to take your little squirt bottle and you are going to squirt both sides of this. You want these to kind of be evenly wet, evenly shiny. I know it seems kind of weird because we just painted it, let it totally dry, and now we're rehydrating it. But the reason we do that is because we want it to be hydrated at the same rate for the entire thing. So we are going to give this a few minutes. Right now it's shiny. We're gonna give it a few minutes until it's more velvety or matte looking, not dry, but velvety, so that we can transfer it on to our piece of clay. Okay, now our underglaze transfer is no longer shiny. So what I'm going to do is just a little spritz on your piece of clay. I'm gonna lay this on top. And then I'm gonna take a sponge, apply pressure. The back of a spoon works really good too. I'm gonna use a metal rib, but the back of a spoon would actually work better to really press over that underglaze. Now this does take some practice in order to get it the right wetness. And as I pull this off, even though the paper's sticking, it has now transferred those spots onto the clay. You don't have to worry too much about getting this paper off. You can, as it gets dry, it will just kind of rub off. But if you don't get it all off, it will also burn off in the kiln. So it's not a big deal. And that is an underglaze transfer. All right, pre-made transfers. You can get pre-made transfers at any ceramic supply store. They come in all different colors, all different patterns. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna take my sponge, smooth that out. There is the transfer side, which is darker, and then the lighter side. And I'm going to spray that with water. This one doesn't take as long to dry. And when I say dry, I don't mean totally dry. It's pretty delicate, hold on here. I don't mean totally dry. Right now, after I sprayed it, it's pretty shiny, okay? And we're gonna let it dry enough that that shine kind of goes away, but it's still wet. All right, once you do that, you're gonna flip it over onto whatever piece you're working with. Press it on. I'm gonna give it one more spritz here on the back. You can take a sponge and just lightly go over it with the sponge. And then when you take it off, the design has transferred onto your clay. Pretty fun. All right, let's talk about making your own reusable transfer. So you could draw something. In this case, I've just printed out this little dinosaur. And there's a few ways of doing this. One way is to take packing tape. If your transfer was bigger, you could use more packing tape. It's almost like you're kind of laminating your design with packing tape. So put that on one side of the packing, or one side of the design, and the other side, press it really good, and then you're gonna cut this out. Depending on how simple or how complicated your design is, you might find it easier to use an X-Acto knife instead of scissors. So when you're done cutting that out, you are gonna have a reusable stencil, okay? So you can kind of see it shiny on both sides. That way it won't get messed up with the underglaze. Now, I think these are a little bit trickier because you don't want water or you don't want the underglaze to get underneath your design. I'm going to give this just a couple sprays to try to get this to stick a little bit better. And then when I brush it on, I'm gonna be really careful to brush from the stencil out to try to avoid getting underglaze under the stencil. Again, I'm gonna let that dry and then we'll come back to it. This is a fun way of making a reusable stencil. You're gonna take a glue stick, like so, and you're going to glue the back of your stencil. Again, this could be your own design. And then you're going to take a candy wrapper, a chip wrapper, whatever you want, And the reason that we use a candy wrapper or a chip wrapper is because, you know, it's waterproof, okay? So I'm gonna stick that on there really good. Then I'm gonna cut him out. And then after you cut him out, you're gonna peel away the paper part and you're left with a reusable stencil. So again, same thing like the paper stencil. I'm gonna get this surface a little bit wet because I want my stencil to stick on there. Press it down really well. Take your underglaze and go over that stencil. For the reusable stencil, I am going to, I've put on 3 coats of underglaze, and then I'm gonna peel that off. Now you can see where it had leaked a little bit underneath the stencil. That's all right. You can either leave it like that because it's just kind of part of the technique, or you could take and just kind of scratch off the underglaze in those areas. Here is the one with the candy wrapper. Again, using a candy wrapper or a chip bag makes it so it's also reusable. I would just wash this off and it would be ready to do another one. All right, for this next one, you want to make some type of pattern. And you know, you might want to do this when your clay is a little bit softer. You could use a stamp if you have stamps laying around. You could use any tool that makes texture. So there's our texture. And then again, you're gonna load this up with underglaze. Now on this one, you don't have to put 3 coats in, because what you're doing when you're loading this up with underglaze is really, it's like puddling or pooling in those deeper spots, and that's the spots that we're concerned about. So I'm gonna set this aside and let this dry, and then I'll show you. So I put on a few more coats and let this dry. And then you're gonna take a clean sponge, squeeze it out all the way. You wanna squeeze it out so there's no more water dripping from it, okay? No more water dripping. And then you're gonna use like all different parts of the sponge. So I'm gonna wipe a couple times and then get to a clean part of my sponge, wipe again, go to a clean part of my sponge, and you're just gonna keep doing this until the underglaze is removed from the highest point, but still remains in those low points. You don't wanna do it so much that that the clay mixes in with the underglaze, but this would be called a stain. You can also do a stain after it's been bisqued, but since we're working with underglaze on our pots before they've been bisqued, this is a great technique. It really enhances and highlights any texture that you have on your piece. Here's one of them that I first put the green underglaze down and then the brown to combine some of the techniques we're learning. I want to outline him, make him a little bit more crisp, so I'm combining Sgraffito. And I could play around with some, Gosh, what do I want to do? Some more Sgraffito designs.